Hello, today is July 10th, 2014. My name is Cheryl Walker and I am interviewing Mr. Craig Racster. And Mr. Racster is from Mount Carmel. He was born in Mount Carmel on March 23rd, 1952. Mr. Racster is being interviewed today. My name, as I said, is Cheryl Walker. Mr. Racster, can you tell us what rank, your highest rank was, and what branch of service you were in?
Okay, I was in the United States Army, and I was promoted to Specialist 4th Class, which is an E4, about 2 weeks before I got out of the Army.
Okay, where and who were your parents, and what were their occupations?
My dad was Ray Racster. He worked in Tampa, Florida for Shell Oil Company for many years. My mom was Virginia Craig, and she worked in the dietary department of Wabash General Hospital for a lot of years.
Okay. Did you have any siblings?
I have a brother, one brother named Kim.
Okay. And did he serve in the military?
No, he did not.
Okay. What were you doing before you went into the service?
I had just graduated high school and started my first year at Wabash Valley College, which is in Mount Carmel. And my draft number was 89 at that time, and I knew I was going to get drafted. So I enlisted in the Army on my own because I felt like it was a thing for me to do.
Okay, what years were you in the service?
From 71 to 73.
Okay, and where did you serve at?
I did my basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then I did my AIT training, my infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Then I went to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. Then I came back home for a little bit, and I was a recruiter in my hometown area. And then I went to serve with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg in North Carolina and finished up my time there. And then I got out and I spent a year in the National Guard in Mount Vernon, Illinois.
Did you get those special, were they wings?
Yeah, I have jump wings. They're right here on my hat, in the front of my hat. Yeah, that's what I went to Fort Benning, Georgia for. It took 3 weeks to get those. They called them blood wings back then. And that's where I got those at.
Okay. And did you wear those on your, is it your right shoulder or your right?
No, these are worn on caps, and they're worn on the chest area right above your name tag, and on your dress uniforms are worn in the same spot.
Okay.
So.
Okay. How did you adapt to military life, including the physical regimen?
Well, at that time I was pretty young, so I was pretty active and pretty much in shape. I played a lot of sports when I was in high school and college, so the athletic part didn't bother me at all. And the rest of it was pretty much fun. I felt a duty and an obligation to be in the service. My great uncle had been in the service, and he was a part of the 82nd Airborne Division. When he was a glider in the gliders back then when they had those. And he and I came home with the same patch that he wore. I had a hat that looked similar to this, and it had a glider patch on it. And that's what they first issued you when you went into an airborne unit. And then later on we had maroon berets after that. They changed the dress code. But we both had the same hat, and he was in World War II. So it was kind of neat to see that. And
do you still have that hat?
I have his hat. Yes, I do. I have my original hat that I got, and I have his as well. And I also have something that I kind of cling and hold on to. He had a back in wartime. I don't think I ever got one, but during World War II, they issued these small Bibles, and it had a little presentation on it, and it came from the President of the United States. Of course, it was stamped on there, but it came from the President of the United States, and he issued everybody a Bible along with all their gear during World War II. And I still have that little Bible that he had.
Did he give that to you when you were in service?
No, he didn't give it to me. He just had it all those years. Whenever he passed on, I had it, and I still have it today at home.
How was the food?
The food was pretty good. They had mess halls back then. I'm not sure they still have mess halls today, but everybody had their turn in the mess tent, peeling potatoes and doing things like that to prepare meals for everybody. Yeah, the food was good.
Did you do anything other than peel potatoes when it was your turn?
I washed some dishes and did a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, you did whatever. It was called KP duty back then, and kitchen police, I believe. So, and you just did whatever they asked you to do to get it all done.
What about the social life?
It didn't seem like there was a whole lot of social life. All the time I was in the military, of course, when I first went in, we trained at Fort Knox, and we lived in World War II barracks. And they were old. I mean, really old. I went in 71, and those barracks have been there since probably the 30s or before. And I lived in World War II barracks all the time I was in. They were just getting ready to transfer us to brand new individual room type settings. And but I stayed in World War II barracks all the time I was in. Didn't leave much for social life. Everybody was just sort of together.
How did you travel to basic training when you first signed up? How did you travel?
By bus. The old Greyhound bus. You don't see many of those today, or at least I don't see many on the road. I think I took a bus from my house to my cousin's house. I was inducted at Louisville at the Federal Building downtown Louisville, Kentucky. We all got sworn in there, and I went to stay with my cousins who lived in Louisville for a day or so before I went in. But I bused down there at that time, and then they came and got us on a bus from downtown and took us out to Fort Knox, which is about 25 or 30 miles outside of town there. And then whenever we went from Fort Knox to Fort Polk, it was on a bus, and the same way from Fort Polk to Fort Benning was on a bus. So we did most of our travel, all my travel was on a bus.
What was your first impression when you got off that bus and that drill sergeant was standing there?
I didn't know what to think, because he told me a lot of words that I'd never heard. I won't say never, but he very unpolitely told us we were life as we knew it had ended. That was, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. But they did feed us good that first night. We ate good. But when he crawled on that bus and started in, I was like, what have I done? And where am I going? It was pretty unusual for my lifestyle.
So after you went to jump school, where did you go?
I came back home and did some recruiting in the Vincennes, Indiana office. I had entered the Vincennes, Indiana office, recruiting station at Vincennes, and that's where I went in. And I came back there and was a special recruiter for about, I'd say 2 months maybe. And I visited schools and different things like that with the recruiters that were there. I think I got sent back there because I had been to jump school and had a little bit different background than some of the others, and just gave it a little bit of variety. And so I recruited there for about 60 days, 70 days, somewhere along there. And then I had to report to Fort Bragg in North Carolina. I wanted to get with the 101st Airborne Division because that was closer to home, but that's the way the military does it. So they ship you far away.
So how long were you at Fort Bragg?
17 or 18 months, I suppose.
And what did you do there? What was your time like there?
I spent the first six months on the 3rd Army pistol team. That's all I did every day was go to the range and shoot. And I was on that pistol team. We shot 45s, we shot M16s, we shot grenade launchers. We shot a lot of different things, but mostly it was pistol. And that's what I did for the first few months. I was exempt from duty there. And then when we had a fellow that ran the arms room, he was called a company armor, and he was getting ready to get out. And he had kind of taken me under his wing, and he said, I'll see that you get in here and get to be the company armor if that's what you want to do. And that was take care of all the guns. I had to go to company headquarters every morning and get the keys. And I was the only one that was allowed to sign for those keys. Company, if you didn't want the company commander in the arms room, he didn't come in, because that was your domain, because you had the key, and only one person had that key. Only one person could sign for that key, and that was you. And I kept count of all the weapons and ammunition, and I checked all the weapons every day when guys came in off the range, made sure they were all clean, working properly. I had to go to a special school. I went to an armor school, and we worked on 45s, M16s, M14s, 50 caliber machine guns, M60 machine guns, and back then it was a 106 recoilless rifle, and it mounted on a Jeep. And we had all those weapons that we had to learn. We had to take them all apart and put them back together. And our final test was they took all those weapons and took them apart and threw them on a blanket and shook them up. And then you had so many minutes to put all those weapons back together and make sure that they were functioning properly. So and I was a company armor until I got ready to get out.
How many times did it take you to do that?
Several. only one when it came test time, but we did it every day, and we were timed so that whenever the final test came, we knew we could do it. But it takes a while. It takes us a lot of weapons, a lot of little pieces, and a lot of little parts.
You said something about being exempt from duty. Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that?
No KP, no night duty, no guard duty. When I was on that pistol team, you were exempt from all those things. You didn't have to do any of that.
And how come that was?
I don't know. I don't really know. I guess because you were sort of, a privileged in a sense of being on that shooting squad. So.
Did you make any jumps at Fort Bragg?
I made a total of 22 jumps, counting my jumps at Fort Bragg, or at Fort Benning. I think we had, I was thinking about that the other day, and I couldn't remember. I couldn't remember if we had 5 or 6 jumps in a week at Fort. It was a 3-week school at Fort Benning. First week was training, just getting to know the basic concept of parachuting and different parts on the parachute. And then the second week was jumping out of the towers. They had a 40-foot tower that you jumped out of. And of course, you had a cable on your back when you jumped out. And then we moved to I believe it was the 350-foot towers. And they drew down a long line from the top of that tower and attached it to your back, and they sucked you straight up 350 feet to a parachute that was already inflated. And then on a certain count, they released that parachute, and then you parachuted down at 350 feet. Of course, the chute was already open, and to get to learn the feel and the height it was a little scary. Actually, the towers are more scary than jumping out of a plane, I thought.
And how come that is?
Because you were just dangling up there 350 feet in the air. You were just dangling up, the wind was blowing, you were just blowing all over the place. And then we got to the parachute jumps. We had we lined up, and they were called sticks. You run a stick, and you lined up to go in these planes. And so my buddy and I, we decided we'd get to the back of the line because we didn't want to be first. Well, they loaded from the opposite end, and we were number 1 and 2 in the door. When we got in the plane, we said, "We're not in the back of the plane." Well, they loaded us in backwards, and we were number 1 and number 2 because when they opened up that door, we could watch down below and see what all was going on. We were right there in the door. So we learned a lesson from that, and we had several jumps that week. We had a lot of PT, a lot of physical training that week. I think we ran like, I don't know, I want to say 200 miles that week or something like that. We ran unmercifully. We ran. They ran us everywhere. That was part of the training. All in combat boots. Whew, mercy. Somebody said, "Well, I want to know why I didn't jog." I said, "I've already done a little jogging I'm going to do in my life. Thank you very much." In combat boots, I said, "I don't jog." I said, "I've already done that." But it was pretty much fun. You had to really pay attention because, like I say, when you get up there, it's all about you. So you have to really pay attention as to what's going on.
How long were you in the armor room?
Oh, I was in that position for probably, it was over a year, maybe 14 months.
And then what did you do after that?
I got out of the service after I did that. That's the only job I did. Yeah, that was my job. That's what it is. Took care of all the weapons and took a head count on everything every day and made sure they were all clean and put away properly and functioned.
Did you pass that on to somebody special?
Yes, I did. I had a fellow that his name was Philip McCaffrey. I think about him every once in a while. He was from New York, and I passed that on to him when I got ready to get out. He was kind of helping me, and so I passed that on to him. And there was another fellow there helping him. He was from Texas. I can see his face, but I can't recall his name. But he helped me back there also, and I let them have it when I got out. When they took over.
Now, did you have to do KP duty and all that?
No, not while I was in the armor spot. No, I was exempt from all duty.
What was your rank during?
I was an E3 until about 2 weeks before I got out, and I got promoted to an E4. I don't know exactly how that happened. My papers say, my discharge papers say I was an E3, and I was, but I got promoted to E4 right before I got out, but it doesn't say that on there, so I don't know how that works. Doesn't really matter at this point, I guess, but so no, I was exempt from all the duty, and when we went to the field, I was a company commander's radio operator. I rode in his Jeep, rode in his helicopter, and basically took care of him. So I was exempt from all duty. So it worked out pretty nice.
What kind of friendship and camaraderie did you form while serving?
Well, a lot with the guys that I worked with every day. Not so much the other fellows in my company, but the guys I work with every day. I looked up right before I came up here. I was looking on the computer for a good friend of mine that I was friends with, and I believe that he has passed away. I'm not really sure. I can't find. I find several guys with that name, and the one that he was from Muskogee, Oklahoma, and I believe that he has passed away. He was one of my best friends. We ate together and visited and talked a lot. We were both kind of from rural areas and had some things in common other than just being in the military. And he probably died from eating bacon sandwiches. I think that's all he ever ate. He didn't like the food he ate the PX some, but he didn't like the food at the mess hall. So every night they'd have what was called a hoagie truck, and it used to come around through the place, and he ate bacon sandwiches off that every night. So he probably died of bacon poisoning or something. I don't know. I don't really know. I haven't had an opportunity to look into that much more, but I would like to know.
Did you live on base the whole time?
No, well, most of the time. I think it was about 3 months that I lived off base. I got married while I was in service, and she came down there to live with me for about 2 or 3 months, and then she got a job back home. So she left, and I moved back on base. But most of the time I lived on base. So.
Now, your wife, was she from home?
She was from Mount Carmel, yes. Uh-huh. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, she was.
How did you return home?
I got out and I flew back home. Yeah, I flew back home. I flew from Fort Bragg. I went to, I want to say to Dallas, Texas, and then over to Washington D.C. For some reason. We flew through the Washington D.C. airport. I don't know how we did that. I don't remember that much, but I remember when I came through the airport at Washington D.C. I was in uniform and standing very proud, I might say. And some guy walked up to me and spit on me, called me a baby killer. I wasn't very happy with that, but I ignored him, went on, and came on home. But I've never forgot that, and because of the war, because of the Vietnam War. And I didn't tell him I wasn't in Vietnam because it didn't matter to me. That wasn't the point. It was just that, you know. And I never will forget. We didn't get much of a reception when we came home. It's not like it is today. I think you'll have a lot of veterans tell you that who were in back there. We just got home and came home and took off our uniforms and went back to work. But you know, today's there's parades and everybody's slapping you on the back and thanking you, and of course I get that some now, but I didn't get that back then at all, not at all, because there was such a big controversy about the war, and you just didn't get that back then.
Going back a little, I meant to ask you, did you get any R&R?
I got a little leave time from time to time. I don't know, I can't remember how many days I had. I came home once, I think. Came home one time while I was in. Because it was just too far, you know, from Fort Bragg to Southern Illinois is a long haul, and pretty costly, even back then. But it was just too far to come. But I think I came home once, maybe twice. I can't really remember. I know I came home once. So.
What about communication with home?
It was good. It was mostly letter. You know, back then, of course, there were no cell phones or no computers. So it's not like in today's world. It was all written. Any kind of communication. I got on the phone occasionally, but not very often. You had to stand in line to get to a telephone. I know that sounds weird because everybody's got a cell phone today. You know, it's not a big deal to have a cell phone, but they didn't have them back then. So yeah, it's a whole lot different. But it was all done by mail. Most of it anyway.
So, when you went home, there was no parade, did your family know you were coming home?
Oh yeah, they expected me, they knew I was coming.
And what did you do?
I couldn't find a job for a long time. I bagged groceries at a grocery store. I was a 22-year-old veteran bagging groceries at a grocery store. I wasn't very happy with that. I couldn't find a job. I did that for a while. I started back to school because I hadn't finished college. I was in my first year of college. So I decided I'd go back to school. And a job came up at the police department. I was a policeman for 6 years. So I got a decent job. And I went back to school and finished my associate degree while I was working at the police department. And it got better, but it was just hard at first because there wasn't anything to do. I always try to tell young men and women today there's a lot of women. Back then I was in all those months and year and a half, whatever it was, and I didn't see a woman at an Army base. You just didn't I guess you did it if you went to the Army hospital or something like that. You would see a nurse or somebody that was in the military, but I didn't see any. There was no women in back then to speak of, or I didn't see any if there was. It was all guys, and today it's not like that. But I always try to encourage them to do something that they can use when they get out of the service. If they're going to do something to make it worth their while, to learn something that's going to help them get a job on the outside. So I said I did not do that. Sometimes we didn't have a whole lot of choices back then like they have today. But I said, I learned how to jump out of airplanes and kill people. I said that doesn't help you much on the outside. It's great if you're in the military, but it doesn't help you get a job on the outside. So I encourage them to look for something for their education, computers, whatever it is they're interested in. If they're looking into police, they can go into MPs or do a lot of different things that might help them advance their careers. I just didn't have that opportunity.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
Well, it took a while. My wife today has a hard time with that. She sees me, I cuss a little, things like that, and she doesn't approve of that. And she doesn't understand back in that day, whether it be right or whether it be wrong, it was probably wrong. People just cussed up a storm in the service. That's just the way they talked. And I talked the same lingo because that was just part of it. And I don't talk the same lingo today, but it took a while to get away from that style and I don't know how I want to say that, but it took a while to readjust. Yes, it did. Because you didn't do the same things, you didn't talk the same way, you didn't act the same way. I use words in there that I would never use out here. I'm not talking about vulgar words, I'm just talking about words and language and lingo and stuff that didn't pertain to the civilian world in any way, shape, or form. So it took a little while to adjust, yes, it did. And the same way going in. I adjusted that way too.
Are you a member of any veteran organizations? If so, I know that you're a member of...
I'm a member of the American Legion,
right,
in West Salem, Illinois. Mm-hmm. It's where I belong to the American Legion. Mm-hmm.
Are you a member of any others?
No, just the Legion.
What career did you do after you separated from the military?
Well, I was with the city police for 6 years, and then I decided I would quit and go back to school, and I went back to mortuary school. I've been in the funeral business for the past 32 years.
Congratulations. How did your wartime experience affect your life?
Well, I was in, they called it the Vietnam era, so I wasn't actually in a war, but I was like every other kid that went in at that time. I thought I knew a lot, so it made me grow up a lot, real quick. And I learned a lot of things that I guess I knew, but just didn't put it to perspective until you get in there. Then you have to grow up. You have to make some decisions and make some changes.
What are some life lessons you learned from military service?
I guess probably the biggest one is probably discipline. Learning how to be on time and do the things that you're supposed to do when you say you're supposed to do them, things like that.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I don't think it's impacted it any. I always tell people I enjoyed my military service. To want to do it again, probably not, unless I was asked. But I'm getting a little old to be asked again. But I would gladly go again if that's what it took. So.
What message would you like to leave for future generations who will view or hear this interview?
Just the fact that I enjoyed my military service. It taught me a lot. I think every young man and woman ought to have the opportunity to go into the military if they want to. I think it's a great learning experience. Wartime or not, a lot of people say, "Oh, we don't want to join the service now. They're in a war." Well, nobody wants to. Nobody wants to go to war. But like I say, freedom isn't free. You pay a price for that. And if my son, who is now 17 years old, if he has to go to the military, I would hope that he would serve proudly and do the best that he knows how to do.
Is there anything that we missed?
I don't think so. I always have one claim to fame when I was in the service. I had it written down on the paper. I was part of a unit that went to Washington, D.C., and we served as riot control for President Nixon's inauguration in 1972. And I stood on the White House lawn and stood guard duty during his inaugural speech. And I think the buttons popped off my coat while I was standing out there. I was pretty proud of that. And a young man from Southern Illinois and standing on the White House lawn. So that's kind of my claim to fame, if you will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, at this time, I would like to say thank you for serving our country. And I would also like to thank you for the time that you allowed me and the opportunity that you've given me to be the one that interviewed you today.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. And I think it's a really important program, especially for future generations and as a learning process. And maybe someday I'll have a great grandson or something that might see this sometime and say, hey, that's my great grandfather. And so that's kind of a neat thing. I thank you for letting me have this visit.